All right, Georgia's the favorite in the SEC in 2024. Not just the SEC, but in the country. So if they're favorites, which I think that Georgia is, I think that Georgia right now, well, knowing what I know, watching what I've watched, seeing what I've seen, I do think that the Georgia Bulldogs are the favorite to win the whole thing next year. They were the favorite to win the whole thing this past year, and they kind of were the last couple of years this whole time. Really, it's a new SEC. It's a new college football. If you don't know, I'll give you very, very, very brief detail. Texas and Oklahoma are joining the SEC. All the conferences are different. There's a transfer portal now. There's a lot of money involved now that was probably a little bit involved before, but it's a lot more public and a lot more out there. So college football is different. The TV rights are different. Everything's changing. The Pac-12's dead. I'm going to always mention that the Pac-12 died when I talk about the changes. That's all I got to say about that. But is it going to be Texas? Is it going to be Alabama? Is it going to be LSU? Is it going to be Ole Miss? Is it going to be Missouri? Who's going to be Georgia's biggest threat in 2024? The biggest threat to them in the conference. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post here, talking about the SEC in 2024. I talked the other day a little bit. Is it unrealistic for Georgia to run the table in this conference? I view Alabama differently than I did last week, a week from... Well, this video, I'm recording this Tuesday night. This is a video for Wednesday evening. It's 6:42 p.m. on Wednesday. I might start giving you the time so you know exactly where I'm at chronologically in case I say something dumb. It's about a week after Nick Saban announced that he's retiring. So for this past week, I viewed college football differently and I viewed the SEC differently. Why? Alabama's been in Georgia's way for a while. Nick Saban's been in Kirby's way for a while. I don't know that it's going to be like that anymore. You see the immediate effects. And look, guys, everyone's like, Alabama's not crumbling. All right, Alabama's not crumbling. And people are like, oh, Alabama's downfall is coming. And maybe they will have a downfall. It's too soon to tell. Just because Isaiah Bond left, just because they're going to end up losing a couple of recruits, it happens. When you have coaching turnover, things change. And they've been changing regardless. People are transferring in and out, whether or not the GOAT stays there, whether or not Kirby is at Georgia, whether or not Steve Sarkisian is at Texas. People are going in and out, right? People have their own reasons. Jermaine Burton and A.D. Mitchell and Bear Alexander the last couple of years, Eric Gilbert, Evan Sharp, all those guys, they all left championship situations. Whether it be for another or not for another, they all have championship situations. They all left it one way or another. So people are going to leave. And I do think that Alabama will not be as strong with Kalen DeBoer. I think they could lose a couple of games. Now, I think you can lose a couple of games and still make it to the college football playoff. But this conversation is a little bit more about the SEC and what's going to happen now in the SEC. No divisions. It's just going to be whoever the top two teams will go to the SEC championship. If I had to predict who I think those teams are going to be, I would pick Georgia as one of those teams. I'd pick Texas probably as the other. I look at Texas's schedule. I look at what they lost. I know what I know. Texas beat Alabama last year, right? So let's talk about that real quick. The real question about Texas is, are they ready for this weekly SEC schedule? Are they ready to handle this week in and week out? Were they ready to handle the Big 12 week in and week out this past season is a good question. Now, they did go on the road and beat Alabama and beat them handedly. I do think that Alabama team was much, much different earlier on in the year. But there were other weeks where it was like, man, Texas, are you sure you're ready? Are you sure you should be dancing with Wyoming in the fourth quarter like that? Why are you doing the tango with the Cowboys in the fourth quarter? Should you be losing games to Oklahoma? You know, should you be struggling that hard against a Kansas State, a TCU, an Iowa State? You have a stretch like that where, I'm going to sneeze, you have a stretch like that where it looks like you're struggling for 3 weeks in a row in November when it matters. I'm fighting off this sneeze, and I hate doing that, but I'm doing it for you guys. Is Texas ready for the SEC gauntlet? I don't know, man. I don't know. You lose some NFL talent. I think they replenished it on offense, right? On defense, I think it's a little bit harder to replace defensive talent in college football than it is to replace offensive talent. And all you got to do is watch the NFL and watch college football. What is one of the major differences between the two? The defense is a lot better in the NFL, guys. I mean, it's much better. Professional defenders are better than college defenders, and it's not close. And I'd argue that there's a bigger gap between professional defensive players and collegiate defense players than there is between professional and collegiate offensive players. I think Texas's offense is going to be just fine with Quinn Ewers. They replaced Jatavion Sanders. They replaced the back. They're replacing the receivers, right? They've got some guys coming in. They've got Isaiah Bond coming in. You expect him to probably be the number one weapon over there for the Longhorns. But can they handle this gauntlet? They got to go to Michigan, who I think they will beat up there. I think that'll be a very interesting game. I think that they'll just get that done. They got a cupcake stretch. But then on a weekly basis, can you handle Mississippi State, Oklahoma, Georgia, Vandy, Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky A&M? Texas didn't get it as bad as some of the other teams in terms of scheduling, but you'll have to handle Georgia at home. A game that Texas can certainly win in a head-to-head scenario. But this real question is, who's going to challenge for the conference? I don't know that it's going to be Ole Miss. I'm a little bit lower on Ole Miss than the general public. Ole Miss is going to be possibly a top 7 team ranked when we get there, top 6 team, right? I'd put them around 10 probably, just because, I don't know, I feel like we've seen it before. I don't think it's going to change that much. You lose your best offensive player in Quinshot Judkins. It's hard to replace your best offensive player, especially when they leave a little bit unexpectedly. They had a very legit defensive lineman. They've got a returning coach, a returning quarterback. Here's the thing about Ole Miss's defense. I'll believe it when I see it. Right? I know you added some defensive talent, but I'll believe it when I see it. Why is LSU putting up 50 on you? Why is Georgia putting up 50 on you? Really good defenses don't allow that to happen. And people were sitting there telling me all year last year, Ole Miss has got a good defense. Well, what happened when they went up against a good offense? Right? That's not what a good defense does. It's just blunder like that. Missouri is the team that I am very, very interested in talking about. Because, yes, they did lose some key pieces. Cody Schrader's a key piece. All right, that linebacker's a key piece. They lost some legit players that they're losing to the NFL. They gained some stuff, and you return Brady Cook, you return Luther Burden, you return a lot of that offensive talent. It's definitely exciting. You add a lot through the transfer portal. You add a lot through recruiting. Missouri, tough team. Beat Ohio State in obviously it was a little bit different version of Ohio State, but beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. Wins 11 games. 2 losses are to LSU in a really weird game and to Georgia in a very tough battle. I look at Missouri's schedule. Murray State, win. Buffalo, win. Boston College, win. Vanderbilt, win. At Texas A&M, win. At UMass, win. Versus Auburn, win. At Alabama, I'll give them 1 loss. Versus Oklahoma, I'm going to call that a win. At South Carolina, I'm going to call that. I think Missouri's going to go 11-1. Just looking at this thing. So maybe Missouri's a team that we should be talking about as a legitimate threat for the conference next year. I mean, that's for real. Am I crazy? Tell me if I'm crazy about Missouri right now. They might be the biggest, if not the second biggest threat to Georgia right now, just by me looking ahead of it. Because I do think Alabama will take a little bit of a step back. I do think Georgia will beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. I think this is about time, right? About time that Georgia beats Alabama. It's only happened once in recent years, and it won't happen against Nick Saban. That's not going to happen again. It only happened the one time. The SEC is a tough conference, man, because I didn't talk about Tennessee. I didn't really talk about LSU. I think LSU is an interesting case next year. I'm not sure what to make of Oklahoma, to be honest with you, this coming year. It's why I'm not talking about them too much. I think LSU's offense will be good again. I just do. But you're losing your Heisman and you're losing 2 NFL receivers. Hard to replace that, especially when you're replacing the quarterback as well, and the structure's not all the same. Georgia, I didn't even talk about Georgia in this video that much. You know what the deal is with Georgia. They're returning a ton. They're losing some very important pieces, but they're returning a ton. They're returning more important pieces than these other teams. And they're already better. Let's just be real. That's what it is. But I think you got to look at Texas. That's a real situation where Texas could be the second or third best team in the country next year. They kind of were this past year, a top 5 team for sure. Georgia, I feel the same way about them. Missouri's a team I think you should you should keep an eye out for. Ole Miss, I just feel like I got to believe it when I see it. I got to believe it when I see it with you, Jackson Dart and Lane. I got to believe it. There's one more step to take with Ole Miss, but it's not completely crazy. Not completely crazy to say you're going to get like 5 teams in the college football playoff from this conference. I think it totally could happen. The 5 that I've talked about in length, Georgia, Bama, Missouri, Ole Miss, and I think LSU. Those are 5, and Texas, so 6. Those are 6 to the threat. I think you could get 4 or 5 in there for sure in this inaugural 12-team playoff. But those are the names I think are the biggest threat to Georgia. Maybe, am I being a little bit naive about Alabama? Should I have a little bit more faith in Jalen Milroe and this Alabama team under a new culture? I just think that kind of turnover is tough to deal with. And that's why I don't think that Alabama is the biggest threat. That's Nick Saban telling me I'm wrong. I don't think that Alabama is the biggest threat to Georgia. I think it'll be Texas or Missouri as of January 16th. That's what I think. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post here. Again, thank you for watching, and I'm putting our newsletter, the link to that, by the way, down below.